What's up guys, Red Wing here, and welcome to part 3 of What If Ahsoka Did Tell Yoda about what Maul said about Anakin. Do go check out parts 1 and 2 of this story if you haven't already, and without further ado, let's begin with part 3 of What If Ahsoka Did Tell Yoda about what Maul had said about Anakin. Our story continues on Tatooine immediately after the events of part 2. Anakin had just let out a powerful Force scream and slipped out of consciousness before Ezra wakes up, seeing the destruction that had just happened. He runs towards his master and calls for help. Appo, having survived the destruction alongside several more members of the 501st, hears Ezra's call for help, and they all help Anakin to his Venator. They also take the unconscious possessed body of Ahsoka aboard the Venator as well and restrain her. Ezra, now in command of the entirety of the remaining members of the Republic fleet, then gives the order to jump to hyperspace for Tython and to contact Chancellor Amidala in order to have her meet them at the Tython Temple. The Venator jumps into hyperspace, and Ezra also decides to make a call to his soon-to-be wife Sabine Wren, asking her and her family to meet him on Tython, telling her that the Jedi need help and that they need all the help they can get. Sabine tells him that she'll get everyone she can before telling him that she loves him. Ezra says that he loves her too, and the call ends, as whatever was left of the Republic fleet make their way to Tython. Meanwhile, on Coruscant, Padme was in her office, speaking with more than several senators, when all of a sudden, Colonel Yularen bursts into the Chancellor's office. The senators call for him to get thrown out, but Padme, knowing that Yularen had once served under Anakin, bids for the senators to let him speak. Yularen then informs Padme that the Republic fleet has made contact, and that they've requested for her by name to meet them on Tython. Padme asks for the status of the fleet, and Yularen gravely tells her that almost no one remains, and that only one Venator, filled with maybe 50 to 100 clones, remains of the fleet, and that Anakin and Ezra were the only Jedi that he knew of to come out alive. Padme, now fearing for the lives of her children and future grandson, asks Yularen if he knows anything as to whether or not they were alive, and Yularen says that he did not, but that Anakin was seriously injured. Hearing everything that she needed to, Padme demanded that her ship be prepared for immediate takeoff for Tython, before she contacts Han, asking him to meet her on Tython, informing him of the situation. Han agrees, and the Chancellor's staff act quickly before Padme soon jumps into hyperspace, fearing for the lives of her family. Meanwhile, on the Venator, Anakin was placed in a medical capsule during the trip to Tython, and Anakin has horrible dreams where he relives the Battle of Tatooine. He sees the destruction that took place on his own homeworld. He felt the deaths of Owen Lars and his family. He saw the deaths of many Jedi who were considered his friends, many of which died by his own hand. He saw Ahsoka, paralyzed with fear as Abaloth possessed her. He relived the trauma of his fight with Ahsoka's possessed body. He recalled the cold that he just felt just by Abaloth being there. He remembered the unfathomable power that this entity wielded. He remembered what she did to him, what she said that she wanted to do to him. And what was worst of all was that he remembered that his own children and pregnant daughter-in-law were now being held hostage by this monster, as he constantly relived the moment where Abaloth brought them onto her ship. At the end of the dream, he would again fight Abaloth in a dark void, and each time he fought her, he lost, and was forced to relive the dream in an infinite loop. Anakin felt true, genuine fear for the first time since the Clone Wars, and wondered if he would get out of this in time to save his family, or even if he would get out of it at all. On Tython, the remaining members of the Jedi Council, consisting of Tera Sinube, Luminara Unduli, Cal Kestis, Eth Koth, Eno Cordova, Sir Junda, Caleb Dune, Karak Infila, Farron Bar, Kit Fisto, and Appa Rancis, were in an emergency council meeting because one of them, Luminara, had felt Anakin's presence in the Force go dark for the briefest of moments before he was ultimately nowhere to be found within the Force. And every single council member felt that Anakin had somehow fallen into a Force-induced coma, possibly at the hands of the enemy that he was facing. Chaos is about to ensue in the council chambers when the temple guards show up and inform the council that Jedi Knight Ezra Bridger has entered the system with the Republic fleet and that Grandmaster Skywalker was with him, gravely injured. They also inform the council that Mandalorians have also arrived and that the Chancellor of the Republic has arrived on behalf of the Grandmaster. The council quickly gives the order to let them all enter, and they head to the medical facility within the temple where Ezra was waiting for them. Kit Fisto is the first to ask what happened, and Ezra explains that the enemy they faced on Tatooine was too powerful for any of them, and that the fleet was nearly decimated. Ezra also explains that he had felt the power of the entity as he had tried to help his master against her, and if they don't do something now, that the fate of the entire galaxy would be at stake. Fisto explains that in order for them to do something, Anakin would have to wake up and heal from his injuries in a matter of hours. Ezra, in response, argues that those were hours that they did not have. This is when Padme and Han enter the room, saying that Ezra was right. Appa Rancis says that he appreciates Padme's concern for her husband, but that they'll have to wait for Anakin to wake up from his coma in order to do anything. Ezra instantly lashes out, saying that that wasn't even an option on the table at that moment. Padme then interjects, saying, "Then try something else. Anything else." Luminara then quickly interjects before Padme can say anything else, telling everyone that there was one way that they could get Anakin back into action. Padme then tells them to do anything and everything they could to get Anakin up, and tells them that that is an order. The Masters nod their heads in acknowledgement, and Luminara, who was the Master of the Order, asked everyone to place a hand onto Anakin, and even asks Ezra to join them. Ezra does so, and the Council begins to use the ability of Force Heal on Anakin, while also teaching Ezra how to use the ability. As the Council is doing this, Padme looks down upon Anakin, and kneeling beside his bedside, she spoke to him. She puts her hand in his hair and says that she didn't know what Anakin was facing, but that she knew that Anakin had the strength to prevail, and that he had the strength to save their family. She tells him to never give up in the face of this evil that was plaguing his mind. She tells him to not give in to whatever fear he was feeling, and she tells him that she loves him, that she knows that he could do anything he put his mind to, because he was the most amazing man that she ever knew, and the best Jedi in the history of the galaxy itself. Meanwhile, in Anakin's mind, he had just ended another loop of his dream when Abaloth attacks him in the Dark Void. Anakin has just about given up, as Abaloth uses her red force lightning against Anakin, who uses his left hand to block it, just as Yoda had in Attack of the Clones. Suddenly, as this is happening, Anakin hears Padme's voice in the back of his head, telling him that she didn't know what Anakin was facing, but that she knew that Anakin had the strength to prevail, and that he had the strength to save their family. Hearing this, Anakin suddenly regained some of his strength, and used Tutaminis to throw the red lightning back at Abaloth, who dodged it. Padme tells Anakin to never give up, and to keep fighting. She tells him to not give in to whatever fear he may be feeling, and she tells him that she loves him, that she knows that he can do anything he put his mind to. She knew that he was the one who was going to save their children and grandson. Upon hearing this, something inside of Anakin completely snaps. He suddenly starts gaining the upper hand against Abaloth, who still puts up a good fight, but ultimately, Anakin defeats Abaloth, and he opens his eyes once more, returning to reality as he continues to lie on the medical bed, now completely healed except for his right arm, which still needed a new cybernetic replacement. Padme instantly hugs Anakin, who hugs her back as the council members try to ask Anakin what had happened. Anakin calls for his arm replacement, before then reminding the council about his experience on Mortis, and about the father, son, and daughter. Fisto asks what the meaning of the history lesson could be, but then Anakin reminds them that there was only a father and not a mother. And Anakin then explains that the mother is the very threat that the entire galaxy, not just the Jedi, were facing. The council is instantly petrified of the implications this could have, but Anakin calms them all down before calling an emergency council session in order to figure out how to kill this entity. The council agrees, and Padme, Ezra, and Han ultimately step out. When they close the door to the medical room, Sabine and her family arrive, and Ezra explains the situation, telling her that the Jedi needed the Mandalorians' help in order to defeat the Mother. Sabine agrees, but asks where they would be heading. Ezra would then gravely admit that he doesn't know just yet, and that Anakin had just woken up from a Force-induced coma. Sabine tells Ezra that she and her family would be outside training for the fight should he need her, and kisses him, telling him that she loves him before heading outside. In the medical room, Anakin would order the council to use the Force in order to speak with both Qui-Gon and Yoda, so as to hopefully get more information about their enemy. They are successful, and Qui-Gon and Yoda appear to the council, explaining that the galaxy was in grave danger. Anakin agrees, telling Qui-Gon and Yoda that this was why they came to them. They needed the help of the Force ghosts so as to gain as much information on Abaloth as they could. Both Force ghosts admit that they did not know how to kill Abaloth, but that they knew where she had taken Luke, Leia, and Mara. Anakin's interest is instantly piqued, and Yoda and Qui-Gon explain that when the father learned what Abaloth had become, he had imprisoned her in a black hole cluster in the center of the galaxy, known as the Maw. And in the black hole cluster was the planet on which the Ones once lived, now known as a reality called Beyond Shadows. And that in order to get there, they would have to master a technique where the Jedi would have to separate their minds from their bodies, called mind walking. The technique was previously mastered by the Mind Walkers, the Force Ghost explained, but they were all killed when Abaloth made her escape from the Maw. They explained to the council that Abaloth had many people who were possessed by her, and that they were planning an attack on 5 planets: Coruscant, Naboo, Corellia, Lothal, and Tython. They explained that this was all the information that they could provide, but that in order to fight Abaloth, Anakin would need a new arm and a new weapon. Anakin agrees with this, thanking Qui-Gon and Yoda for the information before they ultimately disappear. Anakin's arm replacement is then brought into the room, and Anakin's new arm is fitted. The council debates as to what to do about the attack that Abaloth's forces were planning, but Anakin gives the order that the council would stay on Tython, and that 10 Jedi Knights and 10 Jedi Masters would be sent to each of the other worlds. Ezra would be among those who go to Lothal, and the Mandalorians who were a part of Sabine Wren's family would be a part of the Lothal battle as well, as Anakin felt their presences in the Force. The Mandalorians would also split into separate groups for the assault. Padme would go to Coruscant to help there, and Han would take the Millennium Falcon to help on Corellia. Luminara asks Anakin what he is going to do, and Anakin says that after he retrieves a new Kyber crystal and creates a new lightsaber, that he is venturing into Beyond Shadows alone. Reluctantly, everyone agrees, and Anakin leaves the medical room as he meets with Padme, Han, and Ezra, and Anakin hugs Padme. Anakin tells her where he is going, and he also explains what is going on. Han expresses visible concern for Leia's well-being, but everyone agrees to their roles in the assault against Abaloth, and Padme hugs him again, telling him that she loves him, and telling him to be careful. Anakin tells her that he loves her too, and that he promises to give his very life in order to save their family. Han and Ezra also wish Anakin good luck, before he then gets into his Jedi Starfighter and leaves for Ilum. Ezra then goes to Sabine's family and explains everything, before the Mandalorians separate, and with the Jedi Knights and Masters assigned to each group of Mandalorians, All except one group of Mandalorians all left Tython, with Ezra and Sabine's family headed for Lothal. Han gets into his ship and leaves for Corellia, and Padme leaves to return to Coruscant. On Ilum, Anakin lands on the planet and heads into the cave looking for his kyber crystal. He then hears Leia and Mara call out to him and runs towards where their voices had come from. However, then he sees Luke, who tells him that he had escaped Abaloth's grasp and that they didn't have much time. Anakin runs after his son, but then he hears his children and daughter-in-law scream out. Anakin runs a little further, and he sees Abaloth's horrifying form as she held them hostage once again. Anakin began to relive that moment once again in his mind, feeling anger towards Abaloth as he rushed to attack her. Abaloth dodges though, and begins to taunt Anakin, telling him that he would fail again as she pushed him over a cliff. Anakin seemed to fall several stories as he fell into a void. When he landed, he then hears Abaloth's voice telling him that he would never save his children as 3 red lightsabers ignited in front of him, all ignited by Leia, Luke, and Mara. It was then that Anakin realized that this wasn't real. No, this was a test of the Force, just as any other youngling or any other Padawan received before receiving their crystal. But just because Anakin didn't use the dark side in more than 20 years doesn't mean that he hadn't mastered it. Because Anakin had mastered the darkness inside of him and acknowledged that it was there as Luke, Mara, and Leia swung at him, all 3 with yellow eyes. But Anakin disposed of all 3 with barely a flick of his wrist. Then, Anakin is granted a vision in the Force, where he would see a mortal woman alongside the son and daughter. He then saw a mysterious pool and a mysterious font, which the woman swam in and drank from respectively, becoming Abaloth afterwards. Abaloth would then use her newfound power to make the daughter and son bow before her. But then, the father intervened, and everything goes white before Anakin is taken to another point in the past, to when the father, son, and daughter were killed. He sees himself during the father's final moments, the Mortis dagger right next to the father, as the father spoke his final words, and Anakin finally knew what the father had meant by his final words. Anakin had brought balance to the world of Mortis, and if he continued down this path, he would do it again for the galaxy. He would do it by defeating Abaloth. No, he would destroy Abaloth. As the father disappears, Anakin suddenly eyes the Mortis dagger, and he suddenly has a realization before the vision ultimately ends. Suddenly though, a bright purple light shone at the end of the cave. Anakin knows that this was his new kyber crystal calling to him. He runs towards it and takes it, before leaving the cave and going back to his ship, where he had lightsaber parts as was given to him by Huyang before he left Tython. He would then use the Force to build the very same hilt that he would have built as Darth Vader in the original timeline, before then igniting the blade, which revealed itself to be a beautiful purple glow. Then, Anakin would leave Ilum, but not for the Maul. No. Anakin would be trying to head for Mortis, as he finally knew how to destroy Abaloth for good. Meanwhile, in Abaloth's Venator, Leia, Luke, and Mara are restrained behind Abaloth as she stood on the bridge, and Luke demands that she let Mara go. Abaloth, however, refuses to do so, and she reveals that she has plans to recreate the family of the Ones, where Luke would claim the title of Prince of Darkness, and Leia would claim the title of Daughter of the Light, and Abaloth would claim the position that was previously held by the father. Both Luke and Leia instantly refuse, stating that they would rather die than join her. before Luke suddenly broke free from his bonds and attempted to attack Abaloth. Abaloth would then shock Luke with red force lightning and knock him against the wall. Abaloth would then refuse to give Luke, Mara, and Leia any sort of food or water as a result of their refusal to join her, and she would even go on to threaten the lives of both Mara and Luke's unborn son, as this was the reason why Mara was there with them, as leverage for Luke to fulfill his destiny and become the representation of the dark side. The children of Anakin Skywalker would then feel absolute horror as the Venator exited hyperspace and entered the Maw. The Venator would then land, leaving Abaloth to take Luke, Leia, and Mara onto her planet via her personal ship that she acquired from one of her victims. And she would send the Venator to Tython, while using the Force to send 4 other Venators to 4 other worlds: Coruscant, Lothal, Corellia, and Naboo. Back on Tython, after everyone else left, Luminara Unduli was the one leading the defensive and orders everyone to prepare for a massive attack. The Council, having just learned of Abaloth, were very unconfident in their abilities, but Luminara tells them that they have to do what they can to defend the planet as best as they could. It is then that a Venator exits hyperspace over Tython, and the Council realizes that Abaloth's attack had begun sooner than expected. Luminara then gives the order to prepare for battle as all Jedi, still within the temple, went outside and ignited their lightsabers. Han exits hyperspace along with the Jedi and Mandalorians assigned to him, returning to his homeworld of Corellia for the first time in over 10 years. He lands his ship in a nearby shipyard, but then a Venator suddenly exits hyperspace and begins to open fire on the planet while also sending ships down for a ground assault. Han would get out his pistol and try to take cover as the attack began. Sabine, her family, and Ezra would exit hyperspace over Lothal with the Jedi that were with them, and Ezra would ultimately be able to reunite with his parents, who he had not seen since he was a boy. He would introduce them to Sabine, and Ephraim and Mira Bridger were thrilled to see their son and to meet his soon-to-be wife. However, this was when the Venator from Abaloth's fleet arrived, and the Mandalorians and Jedi would prepare for battle in front of Ezra's old home. Padme would come out of hyperspace landing on Coruscant, and she would immediately give the order for a Venator to be sent to her homeworld of Naboo, another Venator to be sent to Lothal, another to be sent to Tython to assist the Jedi, and another Venator to be sent to Corellia. She then explains that she would be personally leading the defense to take place on Naboo, and she would be taking calls from all the other planets she listed. She places Colonel Yularen in charge of Coruscant's defense, before she leaves to meet the rest of the defense team on Naboo. However, it is just after Padme leaves that Abaloth's attack begins on Coruscant, and Yularen scrambles to get everyone ready to defend the planet. Padme arrives on Naboo in her personal ship and meets with the Mandalorians and Jedi there. When they're discussing the strategy for the planet's defense, however, is when Abaloth's fleet arrives, and everyone is forced to prepare for battle. In space, Anakin meditates in his ship as he tries to reach Mortis, with no success. After a half hour, he is visibly frustrated and even bangs his mechanical hand on the table. Then, the ghost of Yoda came to him, telling him that he knew how to get to Mortis. Anakin calms down and asks Yoda to teach him how to get there. Yoda tells him to close his eyes, to clear his mind, to concentrate on his memories on the Force planet, and to use the Force to take him where he needed to go. Anakin does so, and after a minute, he opens his eyes and finds himself on Mortis, exactly where the father had died, and he sees the Mortis dagger, retrieving it, before a white light overcomes him and he is teleported back to his ship. Anakin opens his eyes again, and he sees the Mortis dagger in his new mechanical hand. Yoda places a hand on Anakin's shoulder and says that he had done well, before then using the Force to grant Anakin some of his power in the Force, to give him some much-needed strength as he goes against Abaloth. Anakin thanks Yoda for his help, and Yoda even teaches Anakin the ability of mind-walking. But Yoda then tells him that he could not help with Abaloth any further. Anakin understands and bows respectfully to Yoda before Yoda disappears back into the Force. Anakin then sets a course for the Maw as he then jumps back into hyperspace. In the Maw, Abaloth takes Luke, Leia, and Mara to the volcano in which she gained her power, and takes them to the dark side nexus known as the Font of Power, and Abaloth would attempt to force them to drink from it, and when Mara's life comes under threat, Luke is tempted to drink from the font, tempted by the dark side like his father before him, but Leia is able to snap him out of it and convince him otherwise, using the Force to shield them all from the font's power. Abaloth is angered by this and uses her tentacles in an attempt to restrict Leia, but Leia is freed when both Mara and Luke use the Force to push Abaloth away from Leia, knocking her unconscious for a brief millisecond as the three Skywalkers attempted to escape, and they ran until they were no longer in range of the Font of Power. Abaloth, however, catches up to them, and the Skywalkers open themselves up to the Force, focusing on their feelings for their loved ones instead of the power of the font. And they attacked her with a blow that was so powerful that it would have killed a regular person. Then, both Luke and Leia plunged their lightsabers into Abaloth's chest, ending the battle before running to her ship to flee the Maw. On Tython, the Venator under Abaloth's control began to fire on the temple as the council members used the Force to create a shield around the temple. The Jedi Masters who were not on the council, as well as the Knights and Padawans who were capable of fighting, would fight Abaloth's forces in the ground assault. The Mandalorians would join them, and they would absolutely tear through opposition before Abaloth's forces suddenly gained the upper hand due to being possessed by the entity, and also because the possessed body of Ahsoka woke up and escaped the Jedi's custody. However, another Venator then arrived, and the Jedi deduce that this is the Republic coming to help them. This boosts the Jedi's morale as well as that of the Mandalorians, and they regain the upper hand. The battle ends when the Republic Venator destroys the Venator under Abaloth's control. Abaloth's ground forces attempt to flee, but they are killed by more than several Jedi Masters, including several of which who were on the Council. Kit Fisto was the one to ultimately kill Ahsoka's possessed body for good. The Jedi had won the battle on Tython. At the same time on Corellia, Han and several Jedi Knights and Mandalorians would be overwhelmed by Abaloth's forces, and one of Abaloth's avatars even attempts to kill Han, but a Jedi, one of Leia's close friends, saves his life. Han then takes a moment to look around him, and he then sees a Wookiee, Chewbacca, being assaulted by Abaloth's avatars. Han acts quickly and saves Chewbacca, and Chewie quickly becomes a great ally in the fight against Abaloth, as he now owed Han a life debt. It is when this happens that the Republic Venator arrives on Corellia from Coruscant and turns the tide of the battle. The ground forces are quickly defeated by the Jedi and Mandalorians, as well as Han, Chewie, and the Republic clones. Then, Han gets back into his ship with Chewie and helps with the destruction of Abaloth's Venator, concluding the Battle of Corellia. On Lothal, Ezra and Sabine would make an incredible team against Abaloth's avatars. The Jedi and Mandalorians with them would also dominate the battlefield, gaining the upper hand quickly against Abaloth. However, they knew that they needed to destroy the Venator under Abaloth's control in order to secure victory, and Sabine's mother Ursa and brother Tristan would go in a ship in order to get the job done. When they get to the Venator, the Republic Venator arrives from Coruscant to help, and Ezra instructs them to not open fire on the other Venator, as two Mandalorians were working to destroy it. The commander of the Venator acknowledges Ezra's orders, and the guns and shields are taken out on Abaloth's Venator as the battle continues on the ground. Sabine orders the commander to fire upon the Venator, and the commander obeys when Tristan and Ursa leave the Venator. The Venator under Abeloth's control is quickly destroyed, and Ezra is the one to kill the last avatar of Abeloth that was on Lothal, concluding the battle. On Coruscant, Abeloth's avatars quickly overwhelmed the Republic military, as they were still scrambling to put up a defense. However, the Jedi and Mandalorians boosted the morale of the soldiers, and after some time, the Republic is able to gain the upper hand, destroying the Venator under Abeloth's command and defeating the ground forces. On Naboo, Padme and the Republic fleet are forced into battle with Abeloth's avatars and are quickly overwhelmed. Padme is almost killed by one of Abeloth's avatars, but a member of the Coruscant Guard saves her. When this happens, the Venator under Abeloth's control is suddenly destroyed. The Republic pushes the offensive on the rest of Abeloth's avatars, and the avatars are all eliminated quickly, and the battle on Naboo concludes. Meanwhile, on the outside of the Maw, Anakin goes to a bed that was in his ship, and for the first time uses the ability of mind-walking to enter beyond shadows. He stops at the Lake of Apparitions, where he sees the spirits of Ahsoka, now confirmed to him to be dead, and even the spirit of Obi-Wan. Anakin hugs them both, tears in his eyes as he did so. And Obi-Wan reveals that he was training with Yoda and Qui-Gon for many years on how to become a Force ghost, but that now was not the time for tears. Abeloth was here, and it was time to destroy her. A deep voice then rings out saying that he agrees. Anakin turns around to see the spirit of a Sith Lord who had suddenly showed up out of the blue. The Sith removes his hood, revealing himself to be Palpatine, and Anakin attempts to draw his weapons, but realizes that since his mind was separated from his body, he did not have a lightsaber, only the Mortis dagger. Palpatine then says that he didn't want to be here any more than Anakin did, but that there was only one way that Abeloth would be destroyed. The Jedi Chosen One and the Sith Ari, together. Anakin reluctantly agrees, and Abeloth suddenly attacks Anakin from behind, having seen the dagger. Anakin would then use the Force in order to transport himself, Palpatine, and Abeloth to Mortis, and it is successful as Anakin is temporarily placed back into his body in the process. Anakin ignites his lightsaber as Palpatine attacks Abeloth with Force Lightning, but Abeloth uses red Force Lightning in return. Anakin attempts to choke the entity, but she uses the Force to throw Anakin off of her. Palpatine and Abeloth are then locked in an intense fight as Palpatine uses his knowledge of the Force to his advantage. However, Palpatine has seriously underestimated her power, and Abeloth knocks him out with a blast of lightning. Anakin would then duel Abeloth once again, using Tutaminis to his advantage, as Abeloth pressed for the dagger, but Anakin would not let her have it. Qui-Gon's Force Ghost then came to him, and he told Anakin to do what he had to. He told Anakin to bring balance to the Force once again, as he was always meant to do. Anakin then embraces both sides of the Force in this moment, and Abeloth is severely injured as a result of a powerful attack from Anakin. However, Abeloth, desperate, still kept coming, taunting Anakin that his beloved family would die, just as he had once killed her own family on this very planet all those years ago. Anakin presses forward, angered by these threats, but Abeloth once again uses Anakin's anger to her advantage, as she then throws him to the side. It is then that Palpatine, knowing how powerful Abeloth was and having just woken up, made a choice, as Abeloth then transported the three of them back to Beyond Shadows. Palpatine then seized his moment and held the entity down with the Force as he shocked her with his lightning, as he got as close to her as he could. Palpatine then calls for Anakin to do it, just as he had called for Anakin to kill Dooku all those years ago,
on the invisible hand. Anakin sees what Palpatine is trying to do, and Anakin uses the dagger to kill both Palpatine's spirit and Abaloth, as the dagger stabbed right through Palpatine's lower back and right into Abaloth's heart. The entity would shriek in agony, and it is a long, long moment before Abaloth would then disappear into the lake forever, taking the spirit of Palpatine with her. It was done. Anakin had once again brought balance to the Force. Obi-Wan and Ahsoka give Anakin a proud smile, and Anakin nods at them before he is transported back to his ship, where he found Luke, Leia, and Mara standing over him. They tell him that Abaloth was dead, and Anakin confirms this to them, telling them that he was the one to kill her permanently. The Skywalkers then returned to Coruscant, where they were welcomed back as heroes. Several months after Abaloth's death, Luke and Mara would go on to have their son, who would ultimately be named Jin after Qui-Gon Jinn, and he would be inducted into the Jedi Order upon a midichlorian test. Ezra and Sabine would marry in a ceremony that united Jedi and Mandalorian, and saw the union of the two peoples. Sabine would later become pregnant, and it was decided that Sabine and Ezra's future baby would ultimately become the first Mandalorian Jedi since Tar Vizsla. Leia and Han would ultimately become pregnant with twins 1 year after Abaloth's death, named Jason and Jaina Solo, who would also immediately be inducted into the Jedi Order. Padme would step down from her role as Chancellor after the twins were born, and she would ultimately live with Anakin and the rest of her family on Tython. Anakin would continue to lead the Jedi as the Force willed it, and he would never tell anyone of Palpatine's role in killing the entity, as he feared that this would cause contention amongst the Jedi, and he would become the most powerful Jedi, no, the most powerful Force wielder that the galaxy had ever seen. 5 years after Abaloth's death, Anakin was meditating in his quarters as Padme slept, when he heard a voice he had not heard in a long, long time. He opened his eyes, and he sees the Force ghost of Obi-Wan Kenobi, who told Anakin, "Well, at least I was able to save your life one time." Anakin chuckled before embracing Obi-Wan in a hug, happy tears flowing down Anakin's cheeks as he did so. Well, folks, that was the third and final part of our story today. Next week will come the full movie of what if Ahsoka did tell Yoda about what Maul said about Anakin. So do stay tuned for that. Let me know what other what if ideas you have in the comments below, as always, and do comment your thoughts on our story here today. Huge thanks to all of you for 200 subscribers now. Again, we are officially on the road to 500 subscribers, so do subscribe if you're new, as it really does help me out. Turn on those notifications so you don't miss a thing. Follow my Instagram at Star Wars Red Wing. Thanks for watching. May the Force be with you, and I'll see y'all later.